This will be part 3 to my reaction to Brad Stanfield's video on the healthiest diet. Okay, so what do we know about calorie restriction? People know that I'm a fan of Roy Walford, not such a fan of Walter Longo, although Walter Longo has done more research. But what do we know about the calorie restriction lifestyle? Well, calorie restriction is a consistent pattern of reducing average daily caloric intake, while fasting regimes primarily focus on frequency of eating. The fasting diet may or may not involve a restriction in the intake of total calories during non-fasting times. There are a variety of fasting diets, sometimes called intermittent fasting, the time-restricted feeding. So this is meals are consumed within a limited time frame, 6 to 8 hours. Alternate day fasting, where you eat every other day. 5-2 eating pattern. Eating is restricted for 5 straight days each week, followed by 2 days of restricted caloric intake, and periodic fasting. What's the evidence? More animal research has been done on caloric restriction than on fasting, and that's why I trust caloric restriction far more than I do fasting. In some experiments, caloric restriction is also a form of fasting, which is called the fasting mimicking diet. The lab animals consume all their allotted calories within hours, blah, blah, blah. In these studies, when rodents and other animals were given 10% to 40% of their 40% fewer calories than usual, but provided with all necessary nutrients, many showed extension of lifespan. Now, if you remember from when I was doing the Okinawan diet, 10% caloric restriction, 10 to 13% caloric restriction, that's really all you need when you're eating a high quality plant-centered diet. So the worm C. elegans, a fasting diet increased lifespan by 40%. 2 National Institute on Aging supported studies in the rhesus monkeys sought to find blah blah blah. Okay. And the monkeys were kept on to 30% fewer calories for 20 years. Although there were differences between the 2 studies, including monkey breed and type of food, both provided evidence that caloric restriction reduced incidence of age-related conditions such as cancer, heart disease, and diabetes. So it does reduce these diseases. One study found an extension of lifespan while the other did not. So keep in mind, this is a restriction in calories while your essentials, including essential amino acids and essential fatty acids, are met. And also all of your vitamins, minerals, etc. So what's the evidence for human studies on caloric restriction? Some studies' results suggest that caloric restriction may have health benefits for humans, but more research is needed. Some people have voluntarily practiced Studies on these individuals have found markedly low levels of risk factors, so it does seem that caloric restriction in humans, of course, like in animals, because humans are animals, we're primates, it shows a marked level of decreased risk of, cardiovascular disease and diabetes. The studies have also found many other physiological effects whose long-term benefits and risks are uncertain. To conduct more rigorous study of caloric restriction in humans, the National Institute on Aging supported a pioneering clinical trial called Comprehensive Assessment of Long-Term Effects of Reducing Intake of Energy, or Calorie, and 218 young and middle-aged normal weight or moderately overweight adults were randomly people, the study was designed okay, they were eating 25% fewer calories per day than they had regularly consumed before the study. Although they did not meet this target, they really only reduced their caloric intake by 12%. So keep in mind, 10 to 13%, that's your sweet spot there. It's important to note that caloric restriction regimes are not starvation diets. They're not starvation diets. The weight loss achieved with caloric restriction in the calorie trial resulted in body weights within the normal or overweight range. So their body weight was normal to slightly overweight. It wasn't a starvation diet. So compared to participants in the control group, those in calorie restriction group had reduced risk factors, lower blood pressure, lower cholesterol for age-related diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, and stroke. Okay. There is some evidence that lower levels of these measures are associated with longer lifespan and diminished risk for age. Moreover, in the calorie-restricted individuals, no adverse effects and some favorable ones were found on quality of life, mood, sexual function, and sleep. The calorie restriction intervention did cause slight declines in bone density, lean body mass, and aerobic capacity. However, these declines were generally no more than expected based on participants' weight loss. Other short-term studies have found that combining physical activity with calorie restriction. Okay, so if you exercise, so if you eat the right foods and you don't overeat them and you exercise, that can protect against bone loss and muscle wastage, and it can protect your aerobic capacity. What's the evidence for human studies of fasting? Observational studies have been conducted in people who practice fasting in one form or another, and for example, blah, blah, blah. How does calorie restriction or fasting work? After decades of research, scientists still don't know why calorie restriction extends lifespan. Why the science is uncertain, You can read this on your own. So what is calorie restriction's impact on humans? So the wealth of calorie restriction literature in rodents, however, allows us to address some important questions relating to the practicality and feasibility of calorie restriction in humans, relevant blah blah blah. How much the rodent data indicate that calorie restriction has greater benefits when more extreme and sustained over a longer period of time. Using the prediction equations derived from the rodent data, we and others estimated that a 5-year life extension could be induced by a 20% calorie restriction starting at age 25 and sustained for 52 years. That is the life expectancy from birth of a male in the United States. However, so if you started at 25 and continued until you were 77, it could perhaps increase your lifespan. However, if a 30% calorie restriction was initiated at age 55 for 22 years, the gain would be 2 months. Certainly, there are individuals who self-impose calorie restriction with the caloric restriction and optimal nutrition diet, the CRON diet. A group of 18 cronies have recently been studied after 3 to 15 years. Dietary analysis indicated an energy intake of 50% less than age-matched controls in terms of body composition, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Concluding remarks with the rodent and primate data indicate that lifespan extension is possible with calorie restriction. So it is definitely possible. Collective analysis of rodent data suggests that intensity and onset of calorie restriction required to induce these effects is probably not suitable for many individuals. Epidemiological studies certainly support the notion that a reduced energy intake that is nutritionally sound improves age-associated health, while results of the first randomized clinical trials of calorie restriction, although short in duration, suggest a reduction in risk of age-related disease and improvements in some biomarkers of longevity. The ultimate effect of the intervention on lifespan in humans will probably never been determined in the scientific setting. Blah blah blah, abbreviations, yada yada yada. Okay, moving on. So, ketogenic diet, dietary management of epilepsy, role of glucose and ketone bodies, calorie restriction, that's what I wanted. Calorie restriction has been one of the few interventions demonstrating beneficial effects across a number of species. Some of the effects calorie restriction appear to directly relate to reduced risk factors, gerontology and age-associated lesions. Calorie restriction is the only intervention proven to increase both lifespan and health span in rodents. Translational methods, models, methods, and concepts and studies. Calorie restriction is a nutritional approach that reduces calorie consumption without malnutrition. Calorie restriction has been linked to extended lifespan or delaying aging in models for aging, including yeast, nematodes, rodents, and non-human primates. Controversy of sirtuins. My point is the calorie restriction with optimal nutrition definitely works. Calorie restriction, what is it, and what does the research tell us? I'm going to move on. Preventing non-communicable diseases and promoting healthy aging are both important in improving long-term health, yada, yada, yada. What is aging? Okay, this is about, you can read this on your own. I'm just showing it. So a lot of what we know about health and about diet was already known. We're simply testing it and proving it. So this is Paul Bragg's Toxic-less diet. So eliminate forever the toxic foods of civilization. So don't eat any refined garbage. Number 2, take complete 24-hour water fast every 7 days. His book, The Miracle of Fasting, will give you all the vital information you need to know. I don't recommend a water fast. I would recommend instead eating a very low-calorie diet that day with like maybe some steamed vegetables and salads, things like that. But don't completely water fast. It's not healthy. You can get electrolyte imbalances and stuff like that. Eliminate breakfast. Okay, this is similar to intermittent fasting. Eliminate breakfast. Some people are so in the habit of a big breakfast that it takes a little time to eliminate this unimportant meal. If you still feel the need to for something in your stomach in the morning, have a dish of whole grain cereal or an egg and a few slices of whole meal toast. But remember, this is the most useless and energy robbing meal of the day, he's saying. So that's very similar to intermittent fasting. Okay. You must earn your food. By noon, you are now ready for your first meal of the day. You may make a salad dressing of natural cider vinegar, health salad, blah, blah, blah. You can read this on your own. But the next question is what to eat with this salad. The best thing would be fresh cooked vegetables like baked potato, string beans, steamed cabbage, peas, corn on the cob, carrots, beetroot, steamed greens, or any fresh cooked vegetable you desire. Now, what about protein? If you feel the need for meat, eat it. Just remember, on this diet, you do not eat meat but 3 times a week. So only meat 3 times a week, similar to, say, something like the Mediterranean diet. You can have fresh fish several times a week, and then you can have the vegetable proteins such as nuts and seeds. Now, sunflower or sesame seeds, it may be best to eat them ground. Don't worry about getting protein. Traces of protein are found in all foods. Sound familiar? Overeating a slow killer. Okay, so don't eat too much. Eat the right foods, but don't eat too much. This goes back, 100 years now almost? Maybe it does go back 100 years. Okay, I forget. I think this was the 30s or 20s he came up. Ridicule for those who want better health, blah, blah, blah. These have to... Okay, moving on. So what is a naturopathic diet? So include a good quality protein at each meal, and it should be plant-based. Lentils, beans, nuts, quinoa, pumpkin seeds, and buckwheat. Healthy fats are essential. Of course, this should come from wild-caught fish, flax seeds, chia seeds, omega-3 fats from vital parts of the cell. They form vital parts of the cell. Ensure that you drink a sufficient amount of filtered water, okay? And make sure it's room temperature, not cold. Fast regularly. Avoid overeating foods. Now, the original concepts in naturopathy, they might suggest that you eat watermelon for one day or something like, or fresh vegetables. That's a better idea than fasting. Avoid overheating your foods, grilling, frying, boiling. It destroys the nutrients. Avoid cooking with oils. And I agree with that. Don't cook with oils. Use the oils fresh. Dietary habits to avoid on a naturopathic diet. Don't eat junk food. What I'm saying is naturopathy goes back quite a while, and you'll see that all science is doing is now finally testing these ideas and showing that they're correct. The concept I love is the Seventh-day Adventist lifestyle, which is essentially a naturopathic lifestyle, has proven, science has done nothing but prove the Seventh-day Adventist lifestyle, and the 8 laws of health to be 100% correct. So it's just scientifically testing what these people have already done for over Seventh-day Adventists, 200 years now. They're the only centenarians that manufactured their own blue zone. Refined sugars and artificial sweeteners, they say to avoid. I don't say to avoid artificial sweeteners. I don't think the science is really that airtight. Table salt, they say to avoid. Opt for rock salt, sea salt, or Himalayan salt. Salt's important. Don't be fooled into thinking that you should avoid salt entirely. Processed cows' dairy milk is difficult to digest. I would recommend avoiding milk in general. Soya, unless organic, it is often genetically modified, blah, blah, blah. Now, I've discovered that I react not well to soy, and I still have to get an allergy test. They say to avoid coffee, including decaffeinated. I think decaffeinated is just fine. There are some coffee alternatives. Of course, you should always avoid alcohol and avoid harmful heavy metals and chemical toxins in food and packaging, like aluminum, blah, 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 blah. Well, my point is what is the best diet? Well, the best diet is as plant-centered as possible. Okay, that's number one. It has to be as plant-centered as possible, as much plants in it as possible. It has to make use of plant protein as much as is possible. It has to have healthy fats. Not eliminate fats, but it must have healthy fats. Okay? Your energy intake must be balanced by your energy output. So you should be exercising in some way every day. Now, that being said, I think that exercise should be kept moderate at most, not too vigorous because you don't want to injure yourself. And that's basically all for this video series.